So welcome to those that have been able to join us here today. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening. We are so happy to be able to end off the month of February, Black History Month, with this incredible panel, but also to continue these dialogues beyond the month of February and to continue to have these spaces for conversation, for dialogue, for learning and unlearning. So really grateful for everyone that is here with us today. Before we start, I'd like to just do a little land acknowledgement. I'd want to acknowledge that McMaster's University is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga Haudenosaunee Nations and within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. To learn more about the land we're on, you can visit www.nativeland.ca. But I also want us to take a moment and I want you to imagine what this very space may have looked like hundreds of years ago. I want you to take away the buildings, the roads, the stoplights, and I want you to think about the people that have walked this land before us, the ones that have worked this land, and those that have protected this land. And I want you to thank them. I want you to remember those that were displaced from this land, those that were physically and violently removed from this land, and those that laid down their lives trying to stay on this land. And I want you to remember them. I ask you to join me in tapping into your own histories and positionalities, whether you sustain and live off of this land today as a native, a settler, an immigrant, a refugee, or a visitor. I ask that you reflect on what that means, how we call this place home, yet we've invaded the home of others. I invite you to reflect on how your privilege allows for you to benefit from the colonial structures in place while continuously keeping Indigenous communities marginalized and oppressed. I use this land acknowledgement as a call to action, one in which I ask you to keep in mind that this isn't just history. Indigenous communities are still being displaced, mistreated, neglected as we speak, all while continuing to protect this land. This isn't history repeating itself. This is an ongoing colonial project that has never actually stopped. We owe it to our Indigenous communities to listen, to learn, and most importantly, to respect. So thank you for sharing in this space with us today. And I'd like to hand it over to Sammy, who will introduce the panel as well as what you can expect to come.
Thank you for that, Nirosha. Hi, everyone. My name is Sammy Yahya. I'm a level 3 BHSc student at McMaster, as well as the president of the Black BHSc Association. Thank you for joining us all today. The reason we're here today is because we know that increasing the number of racialized providers, especially Black providers in healthcare, is essential in increasing access to healthcare for many communities, as well as the improvement of the quality of treatment for so many racialized patients. With that goal in mind, the BBA was formed, and I'd like to introduce the club that I'm currently the president of, and I have my vice president here with me, Shek. The BBA was created in the summer of 2020, following a summer of activism and a lot of pain. You had massive protests, the Black Lives Matter movement really coming in strong. And as a group of students, we noticed that there was something wrong in our community. So we decided to mobilize and create a group and come together to address some areas of improvement and issues we saw. So with the goal of creating a more equitable and representative experience for Black prospective and current BHSC students, we aim to represent, support, and uplift all Black students in the program. So from creating an equitable admission stream to analyzing the degree of power and privilege in our program, to outreach to several different high schools around the province to see how we can best support them in their journeys to healthcare potentially. We intend to listen to Black BHSC students and act to make positive change within the program. And one of our initiatives is this panel. And today we're joined by some amazing, extremely accomplished individuals who gave their time to this important panel to talk about how we can all take our strides to better our own community and engage by listening to experiences, challenge, opportunities of these various Black healthcare professionals and Black healthcare students as well. And so in the next 2 hours, we'll be delving into the myths and learning from creating and sustaining equitable admission streams, as well as understanding the gaps in support that we can provide our Black learners and professionals in their respective spaces. Okay. with all of that being said, I'd like to begin our discussion today. I would like to introduce a video done by Dr. Suzanne Archie, who's a psychiatrist and professor and chair of the Anti-Black Racism Committee in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences. And although she could not be here physically to do this talk today, she sent a video in regarding Black physicians in training and her work for all of us to view. So I'll let that video come in.
This town hall for Black students,
We might be having some technical difficulties. Just give it 1 second while we get this sorted out.
I have no
Can you confirm, are you able to hear it? No? What about
conflicts of
now?
interest to declare.
Okay,
At the end of this presentation, you will be able to identify health and Thank you. George Floyd's death and the rash of shootings spurred interest in uncovering systemic barriers facing Black communities. Recognizing the need for action, the Anti-Black Racism Task Force with the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurosciences, along with internal medicine, commissioned a town hall. This town hall for Black students, Black physicians in training, builds on McMaster's EDI action plan by giving voice to Black physicians in training. I have no conflicts of interest to declare. At the end of this presentation, you will be able to identify health inequities facing young people from Black communities. You'll be able to address some of the educational challenges faced by Black physicians in training and appreciate the importance of good allies, sponsors, and mentors to help with educational achievement. In this talk, you will be presented with research about the underrepresentation of physicians and physicians in training, a needs assessment of Black physicians in training, qualitative analysis of their feedback, and recommendations. I will be building on a proposal put together by Black Medical Students Association of Canada and the Black Residents Association of Ontario, as well as a needs assessment conducted by myself, Dr. Abu Baker Khalifa, critical care, internal medicine, and Dr. Madeleine Verhosevic, hematologist. We interviewed Black medical students, internal medicine and psychiatry residents, medicine and psychiatry subspecialties, and fellows. We provided a safer space for them to discuss their issues, ensuring anonymity and confidentiality. Underrepresentation of Black physicians in training. The Toronto Star talked about Shika, who was a valedictorian and the one Black student out of 259 in the class of 2020. The class of 2022, there'll be 14 Black students graduating, the class of 23, 15, and the class of 24, 25. And so how did U of T achieve this? Well, they have the U of T Black Student Application Program, and I'm going to talk about McMaster's version, and the Toronto Community of Support, or CAUSE, where undergraduate students do volunteer work in communities. They set up mentorship and supervisory relationships with physicians and researchers. So why is it important to have Black physicians in training? Well, physician-patient concordance with respect to race reduces infant mortality. This is a study done in the US based on the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration database. It's like a Medicare database. And they looked at newborns and found that Black newborns were more than twice as likely to die in the ICU, neonatal unit. Concordance brought little benefit for white babies, but racial concordance for Black newborns reduced mortality rates by 58%. The other issue is that streaming starts early in elementary school. So Black physicians in training, there are teachers and authority figures trying to push you off the track, suggesting that you do not have the constitution to handle high academic pursuits. The Global News had an article where they said that the Ontario school boards were unable to track complaints of anti-Black racism. So the Ministry of Education conducted their own survey in 2020. So they collected data from 2013 to 2019. Looking at suspensions, what they found was grade 8 students who were Black, 1 in 8 were suspended, whereas white students, 1 in 20 were suspended from grade 8. But then what they did was they looked at the reasons why these children were suspended, and they found that 78% of the time, youth were suspended for reasons that were not condoned by the Ministry of Education. So this is what structural racism can look like. There's been a leaky pipeline from elementary school all the way into residency training, fellowship, and inclusion in departments. Social capital and generational privilege. High school and undergraduate students lack role models in medicine. Someone who looks like you, who can speak with, who you are comfortable with and able to ask more in-depth questions about the process. Intergenerationally, we don't have Black doctors. We have been historically marginalized away from medicine. Diversity of needs within Black communities. Black students are not a monolith. It is important to think about who is being left behind. So there are refugee, recent immigrants, second and third generation Black Canadians, members of historic Black Canadian communities. 60 to 70% of university degrees are achieved by women compared to Black men. Financial barriers. Choosing McMaster Medical School incurs more debt compared to other schools like U of T that have summer holidays. There are no summer jobs at McMaster. This advantages students from wealthy families. Barriers include microaggression. These are ambiguous in nature. These are statements that can make it challenging to address. They can be demeaning and not inclusive. Also, reference to vulnerable communities and not individuals. So ignoring the resilience of communities and not appreciating the historical context. Overt racism. A lot of us have dealt with overt, insane forms of racism. Students felt mentorship from Black faculty was needed to help address these issues. There were experiences of being called the N-word, usually by patients, but others in the room would ignore or not know how to support the student through these experiences. Recommendations. Build a more diverse community on campus, pre-medical school, and throughout medical training. Cluster hires for faculty. So McMaster University has hired 12 Black faculty, from the Faculty of Humanities all the way to Faculty of Health Sciences. And then the Senate has just recently approved the Black Application Stream, or BEST program. So the BEST application stream has already been passed by the Senate. It's modeled after Indigenous application stream that already exists at McMaster. Black students apply to a separate stream. They must meet minimum academic standards. The MMI and Casper scores apply. Applicants' overall score must be within 0.5 standard deviations of the mean general pool to advance. Black students provide a short personal essay. There's no designated or reserved spots, but those students who advance are offered a position before the general pool. Calgary, Ottawa, U of T, and Dalhousie all have similar programs. Mentorship and sponsorship. Having a mentor to guide you through the process and keep you on track is really important. Working with a Black physician for the first time, it feels amazing. Wow, I've been missing out. Allies. I don't think I could have managed all this year without people who supported me, put me under their wing. If it is just going to be for Black and racialized people to talk about it, there's not enough of us to form a critical mass. Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Archie for that amazing video, super informational. I'd also like to thank Dr. Archie for being a staple in the McMaster community, and specifically in the McMaster Black community. So we as students, past students, future students, we all appreciate you and we thank you for everything you do in a professional, but also in a mentorship capacity to show the example on how we should move forward. That being said, that was the video, and it's now time to move on to our great panel discussion that we have planned today. My name, as Sammy alluded to, is Shek Chuambu. I'll quickly introduce myself. I'll be today's moderator for the panel discussion. So hi, I'm Shek Chuambu, fourth year health science student, proud vice president of the Black BHSc Association, BBA for short. At McMaster, what I've liked and enjoyed doing is I'm also a member of the varsity soccer team. Well, more importantly, I was a first year life that I transferred into the health science program. And that personal change into health sciences is what captivated me and made me feel like I found a home and a place. And that's why I try to be so involved in ensuring that there's no accessibility barriers for prospective Black students, because this is where I found my home and found my drive into deciding my future career choice, which is aspiring for a career in healthcare. So that's really integral to why I'm here, why I try to be involved, and why I'm thankful for videos like Dr. Archie just shared with us. That being said, that was me as a moderator. We have four amazing panelists, and I'd like to go through them one by one, give them the floor, 3 to 5 minutes to talk about themselves, some of the work they've done, and really give everyone here in attendance today a great insight about what they do and how what they may bring to today's panel. I'll just go in order of the names that I see on my screen. So starting off with Sanat, thank you for being here. You're welcome to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, Shek. Hi, everyone. My name is Sanat. I'm a level 3 nursing student at McMaster. I'm in the 4-year basic program at the MAC site. For nursing students, there are 3 different locations, MAC, Conestoga, and Mohawk. So a little bit about me. I'm the president of the first academic chapter of the Canadian Black Nurses Alliance at McMaster. So I've been leading it for this year and hopefully continuing to lead it into next year. This club is relatively new. We just started last year. CBNA, the entire organization, started last year. So we're still trying to get our foot in and develop and establish our community. But so far we've made a lot of progress. Our main mission is just to connect Black students from all 3 sites because there's so few of us. So bringing everybody together and providing them with the tools and supports to excel in their academic and their professional careers. So we provide mentoring services. We link students with Black nursing professionals to view them as mentors, for them to ask questions. One of our more successful events would be the New Grad Live discussion that we have every semester. And the purpose of that event is to bring on new Black graduate nurses who recently graduated from McMaster, put them on a panel and have students come and ask them anything they want to ask them about discrimination in healthcare, the challenges that they faced transitioning from school into clinical practice, what it's been like at their respective specialties. So those are the types of topics that we discuss in those panels, and we have that every semester. Besides CBNA, I am an undergraduate mentor with the Black Student Mentorship Program. I've been doing it for 2 years now, so I just mentor a first year nursing student. That's my preference, to be with a nursing student, because the struggle is a little bit different. But yeah, so that's a bit about me. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much, Sanat. We really appreciate that. Next name on my screen here is Mary. Please feel free to also share a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Ajeni Fuja. I am a midwife in Hamilton. I work at the Hamilton Midwives and graduated from McMaster in 2020. I'm very glad to be here today for this discussion. When I was at McMaster, I don't think these clubs were established just yet, so I'm really glad to see how much progress has been made already. Yeah, so I am working towards being involved at McMaster in a couple of ways. I'm trying to finish my training to become a preceptor. I've done some courses recently so that I can hopefully mentor people of color as they go through their clinical placements as a part of midwifery. The midwifery program at McMaster is fairly small. My graduating class was less than 30 people, and they admit about 30. So it is like super important to have some level of mentorship. And so last year there have been some pilot projects to help with the application stream for midwifery for Black applicants that I had the privilege of being a part of last year, which was great. And I know that's continuing on this year as well. So yeah, I just am very glad to discuss with other people about what we can do moving forward for the Black community.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mary. Just really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to it as well and getting your insight. Next name I have on my screen is Dr. Semalulu.
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm a PGY4. I'm currently training in rheumatology. I doing rheumatology at McMaster. I did my internal medicine at McMaster as well. Prior to that, I went to medical school at the Northern Ontario School of Medicine in Thunder Bay. And then I did my undergraduate studies in the States in Buffalo, and my master's there as well in public health. So currently I'm doing quite a bit of sort of EDI work. At McMaster, I'm the co-chair of the PGME EDI committee, which actually Dr. Archie is the director of that committee. Provincially, I have worked with the BRPO. I think we mentioned that in Dr. Archie's presentation, the Black Resident Physicians of Ontario. I'm sort of transitioning out of that and focusing more on the Black Physicians of Canada, which is a national organization that I helped co-found with another resident in Alberta. Essentially, that came out of, after the murder of George Floyd, we kind of came together to develop that organization. And that's sort of something that, anybody who's looking to enter medicine or who is in medicine can find lots of great resources and community there. I think I'll just kind of leave it at that. And if you'd like to hear more about some of the things I'm working on, then we can chat about it throughout the evening.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Semalulu. Last but not least, we have Angelo Grant. Just introduce yourself.
All right, cool. Thank you, Shek. So my name's Angelo Grant, as Shek just said. I'm a first year student at the University of Toronto in their MD program. I went to McMaster and I was in the health sciences program. So I was part of that group that helped start the BBA along with Sammy and Shek. I started Pitch Magazine when I was at McMaster. So that was a publication to showcase the creative expression of Black students and Black youth throughout McMaster and in our wider Ontario community. I was a founding member of the Black Students Association at McMaster in my second year. I was part of the Black Student Mentorship Program as well, which Sanat mentioned earlier. And they've just opened a Black Student Success Center, and I helped to curate some of the artwork that was in there. So if you guys ever have a chance to check that out, I highly encourage that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion today. And in my third year, I did a project with Dr. Archie as well. So she's been an incredible mentor. And yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, Angelo. Thank you to all our panelists. I'm sure myself, I'm echoing the emotions of all the attendees that were extremely excited for this panel discussion. So without further ado, we'll get right into the questions, and I'll pose it to you. What I'll do is we'll go in a reverse order of the intros. So without further ado, the first question I'd like to ask is, to begin, could each of you panelists discuss what it was like for you to navigate the various academic and professional environment as a Black learner and faculty? So maybe I can paste that in the chat if need be. But Angelo, I'd start with you, then we'll go to Dr. Semalulu and we'll work reverse.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, a unique experience when you're a Black learner in these academic spaces. I think we've all just spoken to, how few Black learners are in these spaces. So I think a lot of time for me personally, I felt like there were times where I felt I had to prove myself and prove my worth and my belonging in the spaces that I was a part of. And this can come from, just your recognition of a general perception of, people not believing that you should be in these spaces, or not seeing very many other students that, are also Black. But it can also come from, what Dr. Archie spoke to earlier, and a lot of these little microaggressions, that can kind of perpetuate this idea that you have to kind of prove yourself and that you might not belong in these academic spaces, and especially in the health field. So yeah, there have been a number of like little moments and things, but I've tried my best to kind of focus on myself and who I know I am, and the things that I know I can do. But I know it can definitely be difficult for Black learners. And yeah, that's, I don't know if that's even something that's specific to, these spaces like health sciences, because I did go through a lot of these things in high school as well. And, people doubting your abilities. And I think the toughest things for me were, not necessarily other students, microaggressions from other students, but, some of the moments that came from, faculty, or like, some of my teachers, especially like in high school, when you have a close relationship with your teachers. But yeah, some of these little things where I realized like, this person really doesn't believe like I have the ability to do, what I know I can do. Or even at times where, early in the class, like, I'm getting treated a certain kind of way, but then I have to really prove myself to even just get a certain level of respect. And then, with some teachers that might even turn into like a kind of tokenism kind of thing. But as I went through like my education, I kind of just started to reflect on that and realized that, these are the people that are kind of, they have a lot to do with, what you can do. If you're a high school teacher, you have a lot of influence on your students, and, building their confidence, and even just their grades, like whether or not you can apply to a lot of these programs. Like the program that we were in is, very competitive. And, if you have teachers that don't believe in you and are doubting you, and, have a certain perception of who you are and who you can be, then I feel like it's definitely a hindrance for Black learners. Yeah, and then I guess socially for me, there's a little bit of isolation. I don't know how much of that had to do with racism, but yeah, I would like personally some experiences where like getting to know someone and then we get a little bit closer and then they tell me that like, or they say things like, oh, like before I knew you, I was scared of you or something like that. And I just wonder like, what I've done to scare someone. But yeah, I don't know if I just look scary or anything, but generally that's been my experience.
Thank you so much for that insight, Angelo. Like as you were talking, I tend to nod my head. I'm sure a lot of us can relate. Dr. Samalulu, any insight is welcome.
Yeah, I think everything I totally relate with everything Angelo said. I think the biggest challenge is exactly what you were saying, feeling like you actually belong here and people trying to kind of knock you off your path. Dr. Archie, when she put that in her presentation, I was like, yeah, that's definitely true. You're trying to be just like everybody else. You've been just as successful as everybody else, but people are constantly, unfortunately, people in positions that should be more influential, like teachers or academic advisors. It's really sad that these people can or have at least told me in the past that maybe you shouldn't pursue medicine even and try to knock you off that path, even though there was no inclination that I couldn't achieve these things. And so that was always a challenge, and people trying to knock you off that path. And I think in my personal experience, what kept me going was I have a strong family support, and I've just been fortunate enough to have mentors to kind of string me along. And as I've kind of gone through my academic journey, I've gained the skills to sort of, continue on my path regardless of what people think. But yeah, essentially what Angelo had said, sometimes you don't feel like you belong, and there's things like stereotype threat, I think is one of the terms where you constantly feel like, okay, you have to disprove that negative stereotype. And although you're not actively thinking about it, it does become sort of evident that that's what you're going through when you do hear microaggressions, or when you might answer a question wrong and people look at you a little more sideways than they might look at somebody else. And so these are kind of experiences that sorry, someone's just messaging me, that I've had since undergrad, well, since high school, essentially all the way through my training, and I'm a current trainee and I still experience these things, unfortunately. I will say that a lot of the experiences I've had have led me to try to look for solutions. And the biggest challenge that I've had, and I think we all have, is that there's not many of us, regardless of where we are, there's few Black people. And so why that's important, I think we all understand, but people that are not Black often don't recognize how beneficial it is to have a diverse environment for us learners. Because if, for example, I go through a microaggression, sometimes those are very subtle. It's really hard to explain to someone who has not experienced this microaggression. People want you to sort of prove yourself. But if you have a colleague who looks like you, or a staff who looks like you don't even need to really explain what you're going through. They can just help you get through the process. And that's sort of been one of the challenges for me, is that not having, not having an abundance, I would say, of mentors available for certain circumstances that are more challenging as I progress in my academic career has been a bit challenging for me. But things are changing for sure, and there are great mentors like Dr. Archie for sure, and then allies have also been helpful as well. So, I mean, I won't take up any more airspace. I could chat about this a bit longer, but yeah, I'll just kind of leave it at that.
No, thank you so much. I relate with so much of that. I saw the idea of representation, but also the idea of seeing a problem and turning it into action. I think that's a big shift that I can personally relate to as well, and it's really important. So thank you, Dr. Semalulu. Mary?
Yeah, so I think that Dr. Archie's video was very insightful. I obviously relate to lots of the things that she was mentioning. Throughout my 4 years at McMaster, I can't say that I had like a Black instructor or a Black mentor that was like as a part of the campus that I could talk to about certain things that you would hopefully have somebody who has similar life experiences as you to discuss. The only time that I had a black preceptor was for a 1 month placement with an OBGYN. And even that short period of time of like 1 month over the course of 4 years of my education, that definitely stuck with me. It played a huge role, the way that I was able to speak with this person, relate with this person, and also kind of watch how they navigate the world as a Black practitioner. It was definitely a really beneficial thing, and I feel very lucky to have had that. And I think it definitely inspired me to want to be a preceptor, so that for upcoming midwifery students, nursing students, anybody who wants to work in healthcare, they can have somebody that at least, at the very least, looks like them and maybe even has some similar experiences to them. I had that placement with a Black OBGYN about like a month after I had like my first experience with like very blatant racism, like in a clinical placement where a person didn't want me a part of their birth experience based essentially solely on how I looked, because we had just essentially done hellos, and they were fine with students in any other capacity. To white colleagues of mine, they were totally fine to be a part of that person's experience. So that was definitely super hard, because I don't think before that point I'd had anything so blatant. And so yeah, it was nice to have that period of time pass and then be in a situation where I could talk to a Black practitioner about that. I think that as a Black learner, even with like microaggressions or like overt racism from classmates is something to consider as well. I was in a graduating class where 2 or 3 of the students were Black, and so that was really, really beneficial, so that I had someone to speak to about these things, someone who could understand where I was coming from. So I didn't necessarily have a mentor, but I did have peers along with me, which is so invaluable. But yeah, dealing with classmates that might speak a different way when they speak to you, or call you like stereotypically sassy, or just straight up use the N-word in front of you, like those things aren't, yeah, they're hard to get past, and it restricts your learning in a way, because a lot of your mental space is focused on that kind of stuff, when that other person might have all the room in the world to study and do all the work that they need to do, while you are kind of fixated on whether that microaggression was real, whether you should be doubting yourself, who should you be reporting that to, should you report it at all, what are the repercussions of that. Yeah, it just takes a lot of mental space, obviously. And going back to Dr. Archie's video, the statement about infant mortality definitely rings true. I think in a lot of ways, in communities that I've worked in that were primarily white, they didn't even like think about how the differences between Black people or people of color could play a role into clinical outcomes. Like, for example, there are certain tests that we would do for newborns that some people would do just based visually, like for jaundice. And so visually, you might be able to identify that for a white baby, but for a Black baby, you would need blood work to assess that properly. And so in some communities, I can definitely see how, if they're not set up to do that blood work or even think about those outcomes in that way, they might be missing a lot of things. But a Black practitioner might be able to see that and understand that this is what this rash looks like on different skin or whatever else, to help with outcomes.
Oh, thank you so much, Mary, for that insight. First and foremost, I empathize, and I'm sorry you had to go through such overt cases. I can only imagine how tough that was to deal with. But just ringing true, not but also ringing true about the idea of Black practitioners and that concordance that Dr. Archie talked about and that you spoke so eloquently about with examples. I can totally imagine how those increased health outcomes would be there for Black babies when dealing with Black physicians. So absolutely, that's super important. Last but not least, Sanat.
Yeah, so I resonate with what everybody said. Firstly, about like having to prove yourself, the constant pressure of just being Black. I feel like when you're one of the only Black people in your classes, you're very aware of your Blackness, and the burden of that can be kind of heavy sometimes, especially when you make mistakes and you feel like you're kind of being the stereotype that you're trying actively not to be. So that can be hard at times. For me, I guess I'll just give you guys like numbers. In my class, out of 120 students, there are only 4 Black people. So not only are there not enough Black nursing students, but also faculty. There's only 1 Black full-time faculty in nursing out of 39, I think. And this professor, she teaches an upper year course. I've never had her before. I don't think I've ever had a Black professor in my 3 years here at Mac. Most of my professors have been white. And this can be particularly challenging in courses like PBL. PBL is one of our nursing courses. It stands for problem-based learning. And there we're presented with different case scenarios. Each scenario focuses on a different patient population, a different health condition. And we do a lot of small discussions in that class too. So even in those classrooms, like the topics of these scenarios are rarely Black people. We do 4 to 5 different scenarios every semester, and I'm just being introduced to my first Black scenario right now. Like I was just introduced last week to it. So yeah, like most of them are white people. We've had 2 Indigenous care scenarios that have been like spread out over the years. The good thing is that we do discuss like cultural considerations. For the topics of the scenarios were like pregnancy. So we talked about racism and things like that, but seldom do we discuss that when it comes to Black people. So I feel like there needs to be a revision of the curriculum, and they need to modernize some of their content. The case scenarios should be updated, include more diversity in the populations that we're discussing. So yeah, because of that, there aren't a lot of opportunities to discuss racism, how it affects Black people, how Black people are disproportionately affected. Most of the patients are Black because we are more prone to developing certain illnesses like cardiovascular disease and obesity and things like that. We don't discuss how representation is important to have because of the lack of trust in the healthcare system. So I feel like all of these topics could be explored. There's a lot of potential to explore the topics if we had scenarios that have Black people as the focus. So that's something that I hope to change, that they change in the future. And I'm trying to push for that. I mentioned in the course feedback every year, I wish they would update their videos and their scenarios. The videos themselves are super old. They're like 10 plus years old. And you can tell that the nursing faculty, and they're kind of stuck in their ways and they're not really open to changing things. Every year it's the same types of scenarios, same people that we're dealing with, and they haven't really taken students' concerns into consideration and like actually changing things. So that has been hard. Another thing, talking more about professional practice now that I'm in clinical and dealing with actual patients. The thing about microaggressions that everybody has mentioned, I don't think we're properly prepared as students on how to respond to aggressions when we encounter them. For a personal example, like it wasn't extreme or anything, but there was one time when my patient's wife asked me like where I was from, and I told her Ethiopia, and then I don't know what really happened in the conversation, but she ended up being like, oh, are you going back after you graduate, like to go back? And I'm like confused, like I've been living here for almost 10 years. I don't know why you'd ask me if I'm going back after I graduate. And that was just a weird situation. My friend, when she was at clinical one time, she was clearly in her scrubs, had her nursing badge, everything. She looked like a student. But when the white physician came in, he mistook took her for the mother of the patient who was mixed race, and she's a dark-skinned Black woman. So when she told me that, I was in shock because she looked like the typical student. The mother was in the room, the mother was white, but the automatic assumption that she was the mother, just because she's Black, and it just didn't make sense to me, and it shocked me. So I wish we would have these discussions in class. I think Black students can benefit from it, and also teaching other students how to respond if they see it happening to Black students or other racialized groups. I think everybody could benefit. Like, we need the support of everybody. It's a team effort. Yeah, and I've been lucky, although I haven't had any Black professors, I have been paired with one Black clinical tutor. I don't think there are a lot of Black tutors. I think he was the only one, but I can confidently say that having him made my experience at the placement so much better. I think that was the best semester I had at a placement. And the placement wasn't like the best placement. It was understaffed, very stressful conditions. So it wasn't great, but the fact that I had somebody there who looked like me and who I could identify with in more ways than one, and who I could talk to after I encountered all these uncomfortable circumstances with these patients, it helped me feel more supported, and it made my experience a lot better. Unfortunately, I haven't had another Black tutor because, again, there aren't a lot of them out there. But yeah, and Mary mentioned how it would be nice to, how like different conditions manifest differently on different skin tones, and it's nice to know how things look on Black skin. Another thing is that we rarely have Black standardized patients coming to our classes and assuming the role of the patient. We never really have a chance to speak to Black people, Black patients or actors, which is, I think it affects non-Black people more because they don't have the experience to communicate with Black patients before they actually are put into clinical. Like in first year, we do lab stuff. We don't actually go to the hospital. Then in second year, we go to the hospital. So I feel like in first year, we should be exposed to patients who look different, Black people, Indigenous people, but most of our standardized patients are white. I don't think we've ever had a Black standardized patient. So things like that, I feel like a lot of changes should be made, actively hiring Black actors to play the roles of these patients so that we can learn how to communicate with them, explore different their struggles, and learn how to just to talk to people. But yeah, that's kind of how what I have to say. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, it absolutely does. Thank you so much, Sanat. Before, I don't know if any panelists quickly want to jump in and piggyback. If not, it's totally fine. I just thought that first and foremost, you highlighted the need for change. Thank you for having such vivid examples. And you talk about how it's a collaborative effort. And I think everyone here is committed in their own ways to help support. And I think together in a collaborative effort, everything is possible. So I'm hoping there's an opportunity to collaborate and help advocate for that change in that nursing department in any way possible. So hopefully this panel can lead to that with anyone in attendance or any panelist itself can support in that way. And I think that's the best way to go and bring about change sometimes. Secondly, I was just part of a conference called the IRS conference, and the keynote speaker was a young medical student called Malone Mukwende, and he is the owner of the Mind the Gap handbook. It was like it was a handbook about how clinical conditions show on Black skin. It's gotten a lot of traction, and hearing all of you speak, it highlights the importance of having this in our curriculum, as you guys astutely mentioned. And I just wanted to highlight that book, and maybe it's not applicable, but just it's this from all of your encounters, it's applicable, and it's been highlighted how important that is to include that in the curriculum. Okay, there's no other panelists want to jump in. I can move on to the next question. I just want to make sure we're good. Okay, beautiful. So just jumping into the next question quickly. It's the idea that when dealing with Black equitable admission streams, much of the pushback stems from the idea of an advantage being given to Black prospective students and so forth. So the question here is, if you had to dispel a myth about equitable admissions program, what would it be? I'll put it quickly in the chat, and I'll ask Mary, I'll forward it, I'll ask it to you, and then we'll go Dr. Semalulu, Sanat, and Angelo.
I think that the myth is like alive and well, where people feel almost threatened with the idea of admitting more Black students into different programs, giving them like an advantage in that way. But I think you need to consider the disadvantage that has been there for years and years and years. My graduating class was considered like the most diverse because they had 3 or 4 Black women that they admitted, which was definitely a huge stride. When we would go to our classes, there was a hallway where every single graduating class from like 1994 essentially was almost all white. And so I think that trying to help Black people be successful in a field is only beneficial, especially in the cases that we're playing catch up, really, when it comes to the generations and decades where Black people weren't even invited to be a part of these circles. I know that at McMaster, a lot of the emphasis for getting into health sciences is placed on grades. And so even acknowledging that some people have barriers to getting like 90s in their classes, and a lot of people do achieve that, but some people might still get high grades and still be very intelligent people, but not necessarily even have the access to know where to apply and how to go about it, and making sure that they have the financial means to attend university in the first place. I think there's still lots of barriers in that way, and that attending and being able to afford university is a huge, huge privilege. I think that even with the interview process with the MMIs, I remember being incredibly nervous because I knew that being one of the very few Black people, if I did something wrong, it would be remembered in a way that it might not with like a white applicant. So it's almost like in my mind, knowing that I needed to be like better than everyone else, just to be considered and just to be like on the table as somebody who could be admitted into the program that I applied into. I think that it doesn't feel neutral even when you're doing those interviews, because the way you talk, the way you walk, the way you interact with people, like all of those things can be influenced, and the assessors have bias. And so I know that when I was applying and doing those interviews, most of the assessors looked the same and most of them were white. And so it was almost nerve-wracking because they could have their own biases and not even consider me for this reason or that reason, or they could have like an affinity bias towards certain applicants that look and sound like them, and that's something that I can't do anything about. And so I just know that that was a difficult part of the interview process that I had to think about. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Mary. Dr. Semalulu?
Yeah, so I think the biggest myth that I think that we should dispel is that these programs are not about reducing the standards for people to get in. It's not like they're like, you're a Black applicant, your GPA can be lower to get in. You have to meet the same exact standards. It's really about, sort of correcting the inequities in the application process. And so it's not, it's kind of, I think we've all seen that like little picture of, what's the difference between, being equal, like, or equities and inequities. And so I think, sorry, taking it back, basically what I want to emphasize is that, not everybody who's applying should be exactly treated the same. It's about, recognizing that, Black applicants or applicants who are Indigenous or applicants that are historically disadvantaged have an unequal opportunity when they're going through these applications. So that's really what these Black application streams are trying to correct. So number one, when they're actually considering your grades, they're not lowering the standards. You still have to meet the same standards that every single other applicant has to meet. That's the main thing I'd like to dispel. Number two, as Mary just touched upon, these application streams want to increase the diversity in the people making the decision because, biases are very real. We have our own biases as Black people, even against ourselves. So you can think about how strong those biases would be in non-Black people who are responsible for grading our applications. So all of these methods that these Black application streams put in place are not anything to do with lowering the standards. We have to be just as good, but they are to reduce the inequities that we face because of systemic racism and historical factors that result in us still being disadvantaged today, regardless of your socioeconomic status, regardless of where you've come from. And then they're also just to ensure that, we minimize the biases as much as possible, even though with these application streams, we still have lots of bias that's working against us. So obviously I could talk a lot about this. I'm quite passionate about this, but the bottom line is they do not reduce the standards. They just try to correct the inequities that Black applicants are facing. And I think they do them quite well. And I'm really happy to see that, I think the University of Toronto really took a great lead in this. There's more Black at least in medicine, there's more Black application streams in medical schools across the country. Dr. Archie mentioned them. And I'm very happy to hear that there is going to be one at McMaster. And I know that those applicants are not going to be any different or worse quality than white applicants. They just may have a better opportunity at being accepted in the program because these application streams will kind of ensure that, some of the barriers they've faced in their lives are not put against them. Just leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Samuelu. Next I had in the order, oh, sorry, Sanat, I blanked for a second. My apologies, everyone.
I feel like Mary and Teresa mentioned so many great points. To add, I feel like one myth would be, I don't know if this was mentioned already, but that Black people simply don't have high enough grades to be admitted because their grades don't meet the standard, they don't deserve a seat. So I feel like there's a lot of things wrong with that because what determines like the deservingness of someone to get an education isn't just grades. I know in nursing we have another assessor of characteristics known as Casper test. So it looks at your personal characteristics and decision-making skills and stuff like that. And I think that's a great step, adding that so that you're considering not just the academic performance of somebody, but more of a holistic thing like who they are as people. But still grades make up 80% of that. And then Casper test scores only influence it by 20%. So it's not a big influence. I feel like they should still add a supplementary application where Black applicants can really show what they bring to the table beyond just grades and stuff. Black people have diverse experiences and perspectives. They can bring so much knowledge from their culture, their upbringing, a lot of relatability, and their ability to empathize with others. Like everything should be considered, not just numbers. Another thing is that there are a lot of people who do have the grades to apply and get accepted, but when it comes down to applying, just one negative thing that they hear from somebody, say a high school counselor, a teacher, telling them that, oh, it's very competitive to get into this program. Maybe you should be more realistic and apply to other schools with lower acceptance rates, schools that might not be as high education. So just one negative comment that you hear from somebody can completely dissuade you from doing something that you're passionate about, even if you have the grades to go for it. So people do have the grades, they're not applying because they're discouraged. They're not receiving the support they need to actually follow through and apply and take their chances. And then also the thing that the doctor mentioned in the beginning of the video of like Black people putting into applied streams and not being encouraged to just keep working harder and to stay in academic levels and getting the support that they need. Instead, they're just put in a box and told, you know, maybe university isn't for you, just stick with college. And that itself, it just, people lose their confidence and they don't have the motivation to keep working towards a higher level education because it's not really achievable anymore for them. So there are a lot of things that act as barriers towards higher education. And yeah, I feel like I just talked in a circle, but yes.
No, absolutely. That's super insightful. And thank you so much for that insight. I think something that really resonates was the idea of how impactful an academic advisor could be, for example, during those formative years. Just personally, myself, my academic advisor told me not to apply to health sciences, and I didn't out of high school. So just to resonate. And looking back, it's a big regret, but everything happens for a reason. So I think it was super insightful. All of the insight has been insightful, but you weren't speaking in a circle, just to clarify that. Angela.
Yeah, I don't really have, too many new points to add. I think we covered, the main concerns. And I think this was, this idea of an unearned advantage was something that we dealt with when we put together the equitable admissions for Black applicants for the health sciences program. So we got a little bit of pushback apparently off of Reddit. I didn't read it myself, but I heard, that's basically what people were saying, that it was an unearned advantage, and that, people who might not have deserved to get into the program would end up getting into the program. But everybody here, I think, knows that this is not true. I think it's just a matter of doing what we can to clarify things and to, I feel like more than anything, like just support our students once we have accepted them through these pathways. Like, I think even just the average medical student or health sciences student goes through a lot of imposter syndrome sometimes. And when you're a Black student and you've gone through this pathway and you hear all these things like, oh well, you didn't deserve to get in and things like that, like that's very hard on students who are already dealing with a lot of microaggressions and already a lot of self-doubt. So I think, I don't know, this might speak to the next question, but I think that's something that we really have to do, is to, build community and support our students. And yeah, for me, I think, in the wake of the death of George Floyd and, so many other Black people, all these institutions, came and put out these statements to recognize systemic racism and how prevalent it is in our society, and yeah, and in academia as well, and that they recognize these things. But it's like, to me, you can't say that you recognize this and then draw from these faculty or whoever who are majority white, and you're admitting that these biases are very prevalent, and then have them judge all of these Black applicants. I really just wonder about that. Because if there were no BSAP when I was applying to U of T, I would really wonder about putting, I was a founding member of Black BHSc, Black Students Association, Black Magazine, like, Black Student Mentorship Program. Like, I'd wonder about, how people would see that. And it might disadvantage me, essentially, right? So that's basically what, an equitable admissions process would be about, to just try and remove these negative biases that we've already recognized as part of, these academic spaces and our general society. because we want students who have like a wide range of experiences, right? We don't want um, to be accepting the same people over and over, and we don't want students to be feeling like they have to downplay a part of who they are in order to fit into these spaces that they're passionate about and are looking to go into. So I think the biggest thing for me is just recognizing that these streams and processes, they're not like charity, like they're not giving things to people like that don't deserve it. Because as we've talked about, like there are a number of Black students at U of T right now, and you can't tell me that any of them don't deserve to be here. Like they're all thriving and doing great things. So yeah.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Angela. I think all the panelists, you guys spoke eloquently about the importance of bias and the impact of bias, and the idea that the biggest myth that I think that I want to echo you guys, is the idea that we're not decreasing the standards to entry. And also, you guys also talked about protecting prospective students that do get in, and making that clear by dispelling those myths. So we are considering time. We'll move on to that last question, but just quickly in a quick fire style, I'd like to pose if there's any other lessons that you guys can share with the everyone in attendance when it comes to what you've learned when working towards such admissions program, or being involved or witnessing. I don't know if there's a couple other lessons you would like to share that you may have learned from that experience of being part of similar projects for equitable admission streams for Black students. That's open to everyone. I don't know if there's any other lessons you guys would like to share. If not, it's okay.
I mean, I don't have any other lessons, but I'll say, just, it is really important to have, like, the main thing about the equitable access streams that I really like is the involvement of people from our community. And I've seen that in the development of these, of the Black application streams, as well as Indigenous application streams. And that is just so important for some of the reasons that we highlighted, but it might also, here's another example of where, someone's application might show that, when they were in their undergrad, they went and did something overseas, some sort of, spent the summer, did some global health work, which obviously costs quite a bit of money, and certain people can afford that. While someone, their application might be blank over the summer because they were working a job that they needed to work to help support their family or to help, with their schoolwork. And these application streams involving people from diverse, racial backgrounds and even socioeconomic backgrounds, they might be able to look at those two experiences equally, or at least not disadvantage the person who hasn't had the global health experience, because they recognize that, yeah, this person may not have been able to, have something as fantastic as a global health experience, but they were gaining skills while they're working, they're getting time management skills, they have responsibility, these other tangible things through the responsibility that they have because of their, personal circumstances that are just as beneficial on their application as someone else's application. So I think that's, like, for people who don't understand the, how beneficial it can be to involve various people in the application process. I think that example kind of highlights, it might be an obvious example, but it's not obvious to everybody, but that kind of highlights how this process can work to kind of, pick applicants through Black application streams.
No, absolutely. And I personally identify in that example. So I really do appreciate you for sharing, because I identify with that totally. Okay, without further ado, so let's proceed to that third question. So the question is, equity work can be difficult and time consuming, especially for racialized folk. In general, how can the Faculty of Health Sciences and McMaster at large work to create a supportive environment for students? I can also copy paste it. And I'll start with you, Dr. Semalulu, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think just recognizing that, doing equity work is quite taxing. Especially, when you're Black, you get the minority tax where, because you're a minority and because this work needs to be done, people assume that, you have to do it and you have the sort of capacity to do it. But really, it does create, it almost adds a more of an equity, an inequity to people who are already having challenges. So, I'll give an example. Like I'm a resident, I have to do the same thing as other residents. I still have to study for my exams, do all these things. And of course I love to do equity work, but honestly, I do much more than I would rather, do otherwise, only because I'm the only Black resident, the only person who can speak in certain settings. Not the only Black resident, but in my program, and internal medicine in my year. But since there's so few of us, we have to kind of take on the burden of those responsibilities, and they make it more challenging just to do what everybody else is doing. And so I think like Faculty of Health Sciences, like our PGME, McMaster in general, needs to recognize that we would love to do this work and we all find it fulfilling, because I think, of course, when you go through a struggle, you'd like to see others not go through the same thing. But it's almost impossible until we increase our numbers, until we're more diverse. It's almost impossible for us who are here to do all of the work. So we really do need the support to get this work done as we increase the diversity within our faculty, the diversity within our trainees as well. And so I'll just give an example of how that would manifest itself is if you have, you're developing a program, or you're trying to address, something through an initiative like a mentorship program or something like that, then rather than depending solely on like the only Black faculty or Black trainees to do this program in itself, you need to provide us with the resources so that we can, maybe do some consultation, we can contribute to it. And if we have the space, we can, play a leadership role. But without that support, we just burn out. So, and then what happens when people burn out? They, leave from doing that type of work. And that's something that, like, I'll just be open. That's something I'm feeling, and I'm only a resident. I haven't even become faculty. I want to be in academic faculty, but over the last few years, it's like, anytime there's somebody who needs a mentor, I love mentoring. I will never say no to mentoring. That's my passion. But I just don't have the space when every time there's a Black student, Teresa's name comes up. Anytime there's an initiative to address anti-Black racism, I'm very passionate about it. But again, my name comes up again. And so, and it's not just me, it's me and the other small group of Black learners. It's quite taxing. So I won't say much more about that. And I don't mean to say it to complain. I love doing this work, but I just don't think it's a sustainable thing for a small group of people to do. So the universities need to understand that they need to provide us with support to do this work. They also need to ensure that if we are doing this work, we're acknowledged. And so I think Angela was mentioning that it's true. Like if someone looks at your CV and they see you're doing, this, you help, doing all of these things that's related to anti-Black racism, that's very important stuff, but it may not be deemed as important as some work that somebody else is doing. And that's not fair. And so, that, comes all the way from like getting into whatever program you want to do and becoming faculty. These issues are sort of persistent. And just universities need to recognize that we need to come up with solutions. Some of them I just identified, but there are plenty more.
Thank you so much for that great insight, Dr. Samalulu. Totally agreed, and that's extremely valuable. Angela?
Yeah, I don't know how much I have to add. I would really just be echoing, but yeah, I think it just comes down to the universities recognizing that they have to support their students. We can't just put these pathways together and just, feel nice and stuff and think our work is finished. We have to continue to support. And I think the universities really have to take the time and make efforts to really listen to what the students have to say, to what Black students have to say. And yeah, provide us with the resources. yeah, I don't know how much I have to add really, but
Okay, okay.
I'm even just thinking about like just in a general sense, like campus wide, like when they put out those statements, was it like 2 years ago? And everybody's like, okay, well, if you really care, you need to fire Glenn DeCare. He did this to me, and or whatever. Or Glenn DeCare is the head of security, I think. I don't know if he's still there, but he had a history of like racist practice when he was working with the Hamilton police, and now they hired him as the head of security at Blaster. And so, everybody's sharing these racist experiences that they have and mistreatment on campus. But it's like, the school will just think it's enough to put out this statement and, just feel nice and just done. But it's like you have to follow up with actions and listening to your students to really, make change and support them, or else, yeah, all the burden of the work is going to fall on the ones who are already struggling, if that makes sense. And yeah, I just wanted to add that like even something like these pathways, like they don't solve all of the issues. So we can't just sit back and be complacent. And yeah, and I think working with the BBA, like working with you guys, Shek and Sammy, like just made me realize how important it is to, find community and, your peers and supports, even if you're not finding it from the institution, like just finding refuge in one another, I think is really important and making things a little bit more sustainable. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Angelo. Thank you so much for that. We'll go to Sanat and then close Mary.
I don't know if I have much to add to this because I'm not really involved in the developing like equitable admission programs yet. I hope to be to get things rolling, but I think right now I'm just trying to reach out to different Black students, understand how they feel about certain things, collect information before I can like go to the faculty and kind of present everything that I've heard from students and tell them that there is a great need for a program like this. I think out of all the other programs in the Faculty of Health Sciences, nursing is like the one that's been left behind. Everybody's like making moves, midwifery even starting to implement the equitable admission program, but I don't think there's even any talk of that in nursing. So I'm trying to like get information and get the support of students before I actually do confront them appropriately with the facts and push for change. So yeah, I just wish they would take our concerns more seriously and yeah, there's not much for me to say
No,
because
that's
I'm not.
totally great.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And I think that's important, right? Understanding the need and understanding the community that we're serving and what those specific needs are, and being informed when approaching decision makers. Absolutely. Last but not least, Mary.
Yeah, I think that there have been some very, very lovely points that have been made on this topic. I think that this work is valuable, so I think that the university should place value on it. So whether that's with recognition or financial backing, any type of resources to show that it's not just words that they support these programs and these committees, but actually showing that they find it valuable with their actions as well. I find that so now that I have graduated, I feel that I wish that McMaster had more programs to help even new graduates, right? So it's one thing to help with Black applicants and even trying to aim to help Black students, but new graduates might not be 100% prepared for what comes next. So if we are aiming to support and try to grow the community of Black healthcare workers and trying to help foster a supportive environment throughout that journey, not just getting them into the school and then kind of stepping back and putting their hands up. But yeah, I've just been fortunate to be a part of the midwifery program for admissions. They started a program last year and they had about 50% Black assessors, which was huge, trying to help with the admissions process and making it more equitable. And I think that it just looked so different from when I was applying. And so I was just really happy to be a part of that. So I think McMaster is definitely moving in the right direction, even if it still has a ways to go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mary. And that's great to see that change from when you were coming into the program and now from the admin perspective, from being on the admission board, I think you said, or the admission team. It was great to see that evolution. Just before we close, I'd also like to say that what I'm hearing and what I like to echo and highlight from all of your insight is the idea that it's never ending. And we can't take progress and then say, okay, we did our job and get relaxed. There's a responsibility to continue working as it's always evolving, but also to best support the students truly doing their work. So highlight them, ensure that they're well supported and listen to the needs, and understand that it's always more work to be done. I think those are really important takeaways. That does conclude the questions we have prepared for our panel discussion. I'd like to thank all of our panelists. We're now going to move into our Q&A period, and if that's okay, we're right on time. Everything in terms of agenda is on time, so we have time for a few questions. So if the panelists don't mind, we'll transition to that as of now, and then we'll go towards closing remarks after that Q&A period. Okay, amazing. Let me just see. Apologies. Okay, the first question, oh, my chat keeps updating. The first question I was submitted in the Q&A period. Sorry, give me guys a second. My apologies. Okay, I'm good. The first question I was submitted in the Q&A section was from Sana, and she asked, are there programs in the schools in Ontario to address this topic starting at elementary school? Since we know it all starts at elementary schools and trickles upwards. I should have probably talked about the structures for Q&A. There'll be open formats, whoever feels free to address it and bounce off someone's response, please do. There won't be anyone, I won't be singling anyone out. So that's the format. Maybe I should probably repeat the question as well. Are there programs in schools in Ontario to address this topic, the topic of today's webinar and panel discussion, starting in elementary school, since we know that everything starts in elementary schools and trickles upwards? That's the question that we are answering.
I mean, I don't know of programs in elementary school. I'm sure there are some, at least at the university level, trying to support elementary students, but I don't know any of them. The one program that I do know that many might be familiar with is the Community of Support at the University of Toronto. It's a well-known program that essentially, what I know about it really is that it's a program to support undergraduate students getting into medicine or even in health-related fields, and they help with mentorship, there's advising, then they even help with preparing for exams like the MCAT. And I think they've even, they're always changing things and advancing the program. I think they're even providing financial support for the MCAT. Not only that, but in addition to their academic support, like helping people prepare for the actual exam. So I know that that's a pretty big one. But below that, I'm not actually sure of any specific programs.
Right.
I don't know if anybody else knows.
I think the community support, we need to continue talking about it, because personally in my healthcare journey, it's helped me at every stage, and especially if they have high school programs as well. And I do totally agree with you, Doctor, that without the community support, I think the path would be so much harder for a lot of us. So everyone aspiring for career in healthcare, please do connect.
Yeah, community support has been, incredibly helpful in my journey as well. And I think also at McMaster, like BATMAC. Sheck is the president of BATMAC and the Black Aspiring Physicians at McMaster, I should say. And they've done incredible things in helping to support students, through this journey at the undergraduate level. When it comes to like before, like post-secondary, I know for BBA, we had some outreach that we started like last year. So some of us on the executive team, I think Anu was the one that was putting a lot of that together, and Sheck and myself did some presentations and stuff, to try and just bring awareness to, some of the options that are available to students, whether that's health sciences or, outside of that, just to make sure that people are aware and, that they recognize that they belong in these spaces and that they are viable options for them. I'm thinking like at the elementary level, an organization like Empowerment Squared in Hamilton, supports students who are in secondary school and are in elementary school. So, they have homework circle programs where they support younger students, and I believe every once in a while they do have presentations to speak on things that students can do later down the line. So I think that's a really great organization to support in Hamilton. I don't know about anything like Ontario-wide or anything like that. It's been a while since I was in elementary school, but yeah, those are some that I could think of off the top of my head. And my mom's actually a principal at a high school, and I think they have like a Black Students Association. I think they're actually organizing to do presentations to like the kids in grade 8 and 7 to start thinking about what they want to do when they get into high school. So I think there are a lot of things going on like at local levels that you could maybe look into. Yeah, I don't know about anything like across Ontario, but yeah.
Oh, that was more than enough insight, Angelo. Thank you so much. To open the floor, not mandatory. I would also say that, oh, sorry. I would also say that simply speaking, like Angelo was talking about, just local impact. A couple of other local impacts that I'm aware of. A colleague of mine at BATMAC works with Black Boys Code, and there's also Black Girls Code. And that's a program about coding inevitably and the importance as we go towards a towards more of a virtual space. And that starts very young in elementary school. And I think that's something worth mentioning as well. And something my mom put me in when I was in those formative years, grade 6, grade 7, grade 8. There's actually a summer camp. I would say I believe it's BIPOC students who are on to pique their interest in STEM. It's at U of T, they engage summer camp. And that's a summer camp. Like, I have a terrible memory, but that's a summer camp that I remember every day of. It was my first summer camp in my life, and it's what made science cool to me. So I think, like Angelo said, it's a lot of local stuff. I'm not aware either of anything provincial, but maybe that's something that this attendee can start thinking about and we could support in the future.
I will just mention, I don't want this to just be about medicine, but there are now also some provincial and national mentorship programs once people are in medicine. So across the province, there's actually a lot of the medical schools are developing mentorship programs for Black medical students. And then there's a Black Medical Student Association of Canada. I think this year they kind of did like a pilot program that hopefully they'll expand to address the Black medical students. And then the Black Physicians of Canada, we developed our first mentorship program, our national mentorship program for residents to kind of fill that gap. So it is something that we will need along the way. And I'm not sure about midwifery or nursing, if you guys have any mentorship programs for people who are already going through their career path. But I think it's really important to have mentors within your field that are racialized like you, because when you do face things like Mary has faced, you do need guidance from somebody who looks like you. And so just something to think about.
Absolutely.
Yes. So at least in midwifery, if I'm going to talk about what that looks like, there have definitely been strides for doing peer reviews, so discussing clinical cases amongst Black midwives and Black students, and trying to develop mentorship programs for Black midwives and Black students so that they can reach out to each other. And so that's across Ontario. These are obviously much smaller because there's not a ton of us just yet, but it is something that is being worked towards. Of course, it's not necessarily at like the elementary school level, but I would be interested in learning about what that looks like and being involved even at that level for sure.
And this question is centered around a piece of allyship, which was taken from one of the responses. This attendee asked, do you think we can advocate through working with people that do not look like us? And that's to the allyship piece, and that's open to everyone.
Okay, sorry if I'm talking too much, but sure, I can answer that. I can start with this, but I think it's absolutely necessary to have allies when we're advocating because, you know, allies, you know, they often have advantages that we don't have. And through allyship is to use their advantages, their connections, their, you know, whatever to kind of help us achieve our goals. And so you do like need someone who already has, like for instance, you know, like a white person or whatever in the room to kind of advocate for you because they already are in that room with an amount of power that we don't have. So I would say that allies are essential, but I'll use a quote that I think it was Dr. Robinson, Lisa Robinson, I don't know if you know her, but she's at U of T. I believe she told me this quote, but she said like nothing should be done for us without us or something like that. And so I think that, yeah, we should be advocating, we should be leading these efforts, but we have to recognize that we do need allies to assist us in kind of leveraging their power or their advantage to kind of bring us up on the same level when we're trying to advocate for certain aspects of whatever we're trying to advocate for. So I'd say it's absolutely essential, and I do appreciate allyship, but I do think that it's important as an ally to recognize, you know, what your role is as an ally, how you can assist, and when it is sometimes, you know, recognize that sometimes we do need time to kind of work among ourselves, to have, you know, safe spaces among ourselves, not to be exclusionary, but just because that's what we need in certain circumstances.
Thank you so much for that insight. I think that completely answered the question. I don't know if someone has another insight to offer. All insight is valued. Okay, perfect. So moving on, I'm just going to read this question word for word. So sorry if I'm looking to the side, I have a monitor. So this question is, I'm very interested in the idea of professionalism in health profession education, a standard that was defined by white individuals to uphold white norms. Can you speak to your experiences of being asked to ascribe to these standards that aren't always culturally sensitive or informed? A specific example is grammar or the way you dress. I will copy paste it as well in our chat, and I could also repeat it if need be.
Yeah, I think, oh yeah, it's just seeing you pasted this in the chat. Okay, so I think all of those things kind of just go along with what we were saying before about, you know, feeling like you have to conform into like this dominant idea of what, you know, a healthcare professional should be in our society. So, you know, that could be, you know, the way you wear your hair. Like for me, I wear cornrows and stuff, and, you know, people might have a certain like perception of that. Yeah, I used to wear an afro as well. Like, you know, these things, like, you don't really know how people are going to perceive them, and it can be difficult at times. I'm not sure. Yeah, so that's kind of been part of my experience, as well as like the way I dress and stuff. when you're in a lot of these spaces. Yeah, and I think like as we've been talking about, like a lot of the work around, trying to normalize things like, as simple as our hair, like parts of who we are and our culture, and things that other people don't even really have to think about. A lot of that work has come from us, and I think just speaking to even the last question, like I think sometimes we need like other people or the institutions to kind of step up sometimes and to take a stand on a lot of these things that affect us and that have really gone overlooked. Yeah, as we just said, like things like the way you speak or the way you dress or wear your hair or whatever that might be.
Thank you so much, Angelo. Also to the idea of, I don't know, my roommate had gave me this term. I didn't know I had a word, but code switching. If anyone has had experience with that, and just how you speak behind with people you're comfortable with, and how you speak in academia, and how you switch up the way you speak. It's an idea that you have behind the current personality and outside the current personality. I just don't know if anyone wants to share that, but that's something that's been relevant in my life, and I have to just become normal with just being me at all times, and understanding that that's the only best way to challenge certain norms, showing how you can get to a certain point by being you and not sacrificing who you are, right?
I just wanted to add something. It's not about code switching, but something about something that my tutor didn't say directly to me, but my friend who was working at the same floor that I was doing my placement at, she overheard her saying something. And it's not really about professionalism, but it was just about how her group, us, the students, kind of carried ourselves. She mentioned that there's like 6 of us. She was like, she feels like we're monotone, or that the way we talk to her isn't preppy and we don't have that spark like her group last semester. Because the way that we speak to her, there are a lot of POCs in our group. I'm the only Black person, but speaking from my experience, when I talk to her, it's a very like respectful type of conversation. I'm not one to just like make jokes or like talk casually with people who are kind of in higher roles than me. It's just the way that I was raised, to like respect your elders and to maintain that professionalism. So for me, like speaking to my tutors in a friendly, like joking, haha, like preppy manner isn't like me. It's not the way I was raised. And my friend told me that when she told me that the tutor was saying that we're not bubbly like her other groups who were mainly white, and that we don't have enthusiasm, we're not excited to learn and stuff like that, it did hurt me, because I do really love nursing and I am very enthusiastic about learning and everything. This is just the way that I talk to my elders or people who are teaching me in higher roles than me. So it was a moment where I felt misunderstood, and she never spoke to me directly about that. It was just, she was just kind of complaining to the staff that our group just the way that we spoke and interacted with her. But it was not, I didn't mean to like disrespect her or anything. It's just the way that I was raised. So that's just an example of some sort of mismatch in her understanding of culture, just the way the POC are taught to speak and interact with our elders is just different from like maybe the way the white people speak to each other. So yeah.
Thank you so much for that example. Go ahead, Dr. Samalulu. Sorry.
Yeah, like I relate with everything that was said, especially the code switching or changing your hair. Like it really upsets me that when I was applying to med school, someone told me to take out my hair. My hair always looked like this since I was a kid, basically, and just told me to take out my hair. So I actually, for the first time, had like straight, like pulled back hair, which is just like not myself. And I remember at one point my hair got stuck in something. Like it was just a disaster. And it was just like, if I had been myself fully, I think people should have still appreciated that. Did I need to do that? I don't know, but the fact that that was advice that someone gave me and I took just shows how strong these biases are, and how we have to take that into consideration. when others don't. Moving forward, I never changed my hair like with other applications. But one thing I will say is it's really important. Like one thing about cultural diversity is that we bring a lot to the table. So often when I'm seeing patients who are Black or POC, like when other people leave the room, they'll talk to me differently. And so it might be an elderly person, you know, I'm East African. And so like a lot of, you know, if there's an East African person, they can usually tell, and, you know, they'll talk to me different, or we'll have different mannerisms because I know the culture, and that might lead them to, you know, take their medications or understand what is going on. Or I have an example of a patient who we've been like trying to get to take the COVID vaccine, and it's a Black patient, and he had various real concerns, and I was really trying to get him. And, you know, that was a case where I just switched, like I code switched back, talked to him as I would talk to him if we were buddies. And then, you know, he eventually got the vaccine. I'm sure that contributed to his decision, but also just, you know, being able to relate to him because we are both Black. So I think like the fact that, you know, a lot of the way that we act or the way that we look is seen as non-professional is obviously wrong. But, you know, we should really flip it to say that the fact that we are different, that we talk different, that we act different, that we look different really does add to what we're doing, because all of us are interacting with patients, and patients that look like us can relate to that and see it as valuable in their care.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that insight. Well, that was, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, I feel like I very much resonate with what everyone is saying with regards to like professionalism and trying to juggle that. And I know that I have always been like wondering, like, will my hair fit in the scrub cap? Will it be professional looking for this environment? And I think that the emotional labor and also the time consuming nature of having to speak in a certain way with certain people, and then if you need to change, like if you're home and in a comfortable environment, speaking the way that naturally comes to you, probably adds to the fatigue that you can feel, right? That if you need to speak in a very particular way with all of these people for 10 hours a day, and then come home and kind of unload with that, right? And then also the time of having to put your hair in a presentable way, like that is work. I think it's just, yeah, I think it's a very interesting conversation to have about what is professional and what isn't professional, and why the standards are the way that they are. And I think that in a clinical setting, it's so hard to change that, because in order to be respected, you have to act professional.
Right. And there's a need for change. Absolutely. Or what professional does mean. I'd like to thank all the panelists. I think that's all we have for Q&A from what I was streamed on my end. Okay, Dr. Patel is telling me yes, I wanted to be sure. Okay, so I'll pass it off to you, Dr. Patel, for closing, and I'll just be here.
Great, thanks so much. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, Shek, and all of the panelists. It's been such an honor and a privilege to be able to hear your stories, for you to share your insights with us all tonight. I think just looking around this panel, the care of not just Black patients, but all patients in general is in really great hands with you as our future healthcare providers. And hopefully also the future of medical education, as you all move into that space as well, is going to be improved for your contributions. I'd also like to just take this moment to thank all of our attendees, many of who have stuck around till the very end, for attending, but also for your insightful comments. So thanks everybody, and hopefully there was lots of great learning, and we'll be able to continue the dialogue. Have a great night.